In this video we want to talk about employee relations strategy. Employee relations strategy is a technique used to plan and implement strategies to improve relationships with employees and their unions. So it's seen from the management perspective. It is an initiative on the part of management to engage with the employees and their unions to try to more effectively implement their policies. Employee relations strategy derives from the business strategy. The aim is to support the overall aims and objectives of the business. So we can see the business strategy as being all-embracive. It covers all aspects of the business, including employee relations. So employee relations is a subset of the business strategy. It's an important element and must be implemented as part of the business strategy. Clearly, the employees are important. It's the employees who will implement the strategy, the business strategy. It's the employees who will physically do the work. The employees who will enable the objectives to be met, the objectives that are set out in the business plan. So it's important that the employees are factored in, are considered, and considered carefully as a part of the overall business planning process. So employee relations is an important element and must be implemented as part of the business strategy. The business strategy could be to gain, for example, competitive advantage through innovation and product development. So perhaps the business plan specifies some process that needs to be implemented, perhaps a technical process to innovate the product or innovate the production system. But clearly the employees should be consulted and perhaps retrained, and it should involve some negotiations, perhaps some recompense for the extra effort that the employees have to put in. But whatever the corporate objective is, be it to compete more effectively and gain competitive advantage, if that is the case, then clearly the employees are an important element in doing that. Employee relations strategy will focus on developing processes for employee involvement and participation. It means involving the employees, involving them not just as the operators of machines and the operators on a production system, or as drivers of trucks or whatever. It means involving them perhaps in the decision-making process. These people know the business. They work there. They work there daily. They know all of the ins and outs of the business. They know it at a micro level. And it's best to involve them because they can probably see issues and problems that are not obvious from a more macro perspective. So involving operators in the decision-making process is good practice. And the employee relations strategy should incorporate the workforce into the overall planning system. It's broadly pointless drawing up corporate strategies which are unrealistic if the employees cannot fulfill what's required in that plan. The corporate strategy should be effective, should be one that can be implemented and that the employees can work with. So their involvement from the outset is important. For example, it could be to achieve through the implementation of procedures aimed at continuous improvement and total quality management. It's one thing for the senior management to say they have a commitment to TQM, but it's another thing to actually get it delivered and get it done. And that will depend on the training and goodwill of the workforce. So involving the workforce in the whole program of implementing a quality program is important. If the workforce see the advantages of it in terms of job security, perhaps better salaries, more sales, a more financially a more stable business, they may be more committed. But it means that management needs to involve the employees and explain to them what the policy is and what are its advantages. It could be that the business strategy may focus on survival through cost reduction. Now, the mere mention of cost reduction can generally cause problems amongst the workforce. Cost reduction sometimes means redundancies, it means cutbacks. But there are different types of cost reduction. It could be that with greater throughput and greater output, that the burden of the fixed overheads is reduced, because the fixed overheads are spread over a greater amount of output. So that's a way of reducing costs. It could be that there could be some rationalization in the whole process. In other words, more effectively using the existing workforce for perhaps retraining, redeploying them, getting in new equipment. But all of it depends on the goodwill and the participation of the workforce. So an effective employee relations strategy must be put into place. The cost reduction route will impact on employee relations. The strategy will implement techniques for gaining employer cooperation and union support. So if it is the case that the management wish to cut costs, then they must have a strategy which will probably involve some quid pro quo. It'll involve some giving to the workforce. It'll involve the trade union, if there is a trade union in place. It'll involve communications, explanations, perhaps meetings with the workforce. It'll involve careful thinking and planning, even before it's brought to the workforce, to make sure that it is likely to receive their acceptance. Their worries and concerns should be anticipated and built in to any proposed change. So any changes in business strategy will have a direct effect on employee relations and can result in industrial action. It could be quite dangerous for the management to not consider the workforce. So when considering business strategy, the management must at the same time consider employee relations strategy. They must consider the workforce. They must consider the impact that any change in corporate strategy will have on the workforce. Now, the main focus of employee relations strategy, well, to develop stable and positive relationships with employees and trade union associations. So that's the main focus. A good employee relations strategy will develop a good relationship between employees and the trade unions and the management. It will minimise conflict and industrial action by introducing a range of communications channels. It will make sure that there's a variety of ways in which the workers can make their feelings felt to the management. They can communicate their feelings to management. Management will understand their concerns. It just doesn't come through one channel only. It may come through several channels. It may be through the trade union, but it may also be through a works council. It may be through feedback from line managers. It'll come back in a variety of forms, so that the management are sure as to what the precise nature of the concerns are. Active employee commitment through employee involvement and participation techniques. It's almost imperative that management try to build in some mechanism whereby employees are involved in changes. The employees understand the changes, the employees work with the management to try to successfully implement the changes, but only if the changes are seen to be positive, to the advantage of the workers and to the advantages of the business. So there should be very careful presentation of any possible changes that may be in mind. If management have proposals or ideas for change, they should be communicated, they should be discussed openly, and when a decision is reached, then it should be implemented. The decision being broadly acceptable to both sides, to the labour force and to management. There should be some element of sharing common ground, values and belief. Develop an organisation where employees and management share the same values and visions. That's the ideal. If both sides see where they're going, they know what they have in mind for the business and what they're trying to achieve, and they're both working to the same set of values and the same set of ideals. They both have the same targets. If that's the case, then management is easy. Employee relations is good because there's confidence in both sides, that both sides are moving in the same direction. There's no hidden agenda. The management are not trying to do down the workforce, and the workforce are not being awkward towards the management. It's a genuine harmony, moving together. That's the ideal. But how to achieve that in practice, of course, is a big problem. These are the ideals. There are 4 approaches to employee relations. There's the adversarial, which is conflict, traditional, which we will talk about, partnership, and power sharing. So we have 4 different approaches to employee relations. There are 4 approaches. Now the adversarial, well, management retain all power within the business and the employees are expected to comply. The only power employees have is to refuse to cooperate. The only power that the employees have is to refuse to cooperate and work. They may go on strike, or they may work to rule. They may work from 8 to 6 or 8 to 5 or 8 to 4, whatever the hours of work are. They may work precisely those hours, not a second more. They may perform their functions exactly as specified. There's no goodwill. There's no effort to accommodate the business. So the employees see themselves as one group. Management is a second group, and it's almost as if the 2 groups are at war. Everything's disputed, everything is fought over. It's adversarial. It's a battle. The traditional way is to have good relationships with management. However, management still have power and authority. So a good relationship with the management, but recognizing the management still have power and authority. The employees retaliate through their representatives. If there is an issue, they go to the trade union representative or the works council person, or they go to someone who talks to management, and issues are brought forward in that way. But generally speaking, it's a good working relationship with management. But management still have power and authority. It's just they work together. If there are issues, an appointed person within the workforce will bring forward those ideas and discuss them with management and go back perhaps with solutions. Partnership, well, the employees take part in decision making, devising policies and procedures. However, management retain authority. This is more cooperative working. The workers are invited to give their opinions and to make recommendations, and management will listen to these and take them seriously. And the workers will also listen to management and listen to their ideas and take those seriously. It's a partnership. They're working together. Power sharing is where employees take on a wider role in decision making and work alongside management. Power sharing is the two sides have become one. They're working together. There's no conflict. Both are seen as important, both are needed, so they work together. The adversarial approach is not common nowadays. It was very common in the UK back in the 1960s and throughout the 1970s. The traditional approach is most common in organisations where management retain the power, management discuss issues with representatives from the workers and try to bring about change through negotiations and through explanation, and an appointed person, perhaps a trade union member, will deal with the management. That's the more traditional role, and that seems to be the one that's most widely used. But the adversarial one is not that popular anymore. It's not as stark as them and us, the management and us, and there was no trust. It's not like that so much anymore. It's more now recognizing that the management are necessary for managing and making decisions and drawing up strategies and competing and making sure that the business exists. And the workers are extremely important in the context of doing, implementing the strategies, making the products. And if there are issues, the workers go to an appointed representative who goes to the management, brings the issue to the management, it's discussed, then it goes back, perhaps with a solution, hopefully with a solution. Partnership approach is beginning to gain interest. Organisations are leaning towards this type of management relation strategy. There is more and more recognition of the role of the workers in the business, and management are starting to incorporate this. The workers are a valuable source of information about the product, about the design, the attributes, the pricing of the product, the placement of the product, where should the product be sold and what sort of outlets. Workers have opinions about these. Workers are also consumers. But the workers also understand the technical processes within the business, perhaps understand them better than anyone else. So it's natural to start to develop partnership type thinking, where they're all working on it together. Power sharing is a new concept and very rare to witness in organisations. Generally speaking, we don't experience true power sharing unless it was set up from the start within that type of business. Power sharing may be suitable for some organisations, but by and large it's not one that's used in a commercial setting. The concept of HRM and its philosophy provides a foundation for employee relations. The drive towards employee commitment, involvement and participation strategies. So the HRM concept, the concept of having a HRM department, a human resource management department, that embraces the needs of the workers and understands the workers and has policies related to the workers which will further the interest of the workers, but also ensure that the business strategy is being delivered and is being met. So there is a drive towards more effective employee commitment and more employee participation. There is an understanding that the unitarist approach, one where everyone works together and works closely, working in harmony, that approach has a lot of advantages. It's just that it's difficult to implement in practice. There may be personality problems, personality issues. There may be rapid changes in the business which upset, let's say, the workers who have to learn new skills, and skills have to be updated, and new technologies are introduced, and there's a more competitive environment, perhaps because of globalization. There are more issues to be confronted, which all move against the adaptation, or the adoption, I should say, the adoption of a unitarist approach. There should be an encouragement of two-way communications. It's important that the unions and the workers have a channel of communications with the management so that issues can be dealt with, understood, resolved, and it all can be done efficiently and quickly. It may lead to disputes, in which case some dispute management techniques will have to be deployed and used, and that's the subject matter of a separate video. Implement employee involvement techniques to encourage participation. It may be that the management have employee involvement techniques, perhaps having consultative committees, perhaps a works committee that will report on issues within the workplace, also perhaps a quality committee, a quality circle, who will look at issues of quality and trying to ensure good working practices. There may be a health and safety committee that will ensure that the environment is safe and appropriate. So there may be different ways of involving workers in the whole process of management. The emphasis should be on team working, good involvement of the workers, good relationships within the workplace, and a commitment to quality. It seems that our understanding of the importance of quality has deepened over the last probably 10-20 years. We now understand that quality is extremely important and extremely significant in the survival rates of businesses. So having the workers involved with quality techniques is important. Now we may look at this schematically. Guest identified 4 options for developing employee relation strategies. Here we have low employee relations. There's virtually no relationships with the management. It's very, very hit and miss. It's very, it's not formal. It's not organised. High HRM, high involvement of the HRM department. High employee relations, good employee relations in the sense of constant contact, high quality contact, and of course low HRM, very little or no involvement with the HRM. And out of this he developed a schema for the analysis of business. So for example, policies which involve high employee relations and high HRM involvement he termed new realism. So it'll fall into that quadrant we've marked there. Low HRM, very little HRM, but high employee relations is more traditional collectivism, and we'll talk about that in a second. Low employee relations and low HRM, that's called a black hole. Simply anything can happen. And the next one is individualized HRM. Now let's go across each of these and see what's meant by them. So we'll start with new realism. This is a high emphasis on HRM and employee relations. It's aimed at integrating employee relations and HRM. So employee relations is part of the HRM program, and the rationale for HRM, for the human resource management section, is dealing with employee relations and making sure that the employee relations are put forward as an important ingredient in the survival of the business. It's the introduction of new collective agreements between employees and management, often through single table bargaining. In other words, just sitting with the employees and coming to a new arrangement, a new agreement, and implementing the agreement. Once both sides agree to it, then it should be implemented. So it's understanding the requirements of the business from a business perspective, designing a good business plan, but then getting the cooperation of the employees to ensure that the business plan can be implemented. That's what's meant by new realism. The approach has facilitated flexibility, multitasking, removal of demarcation, and put facilities in place for quality improvement. So it tries to achieve more flexibility in the workplace. Workers moving between tasks, moving between functions even. Multitasking, people being able to do several different tasks, picking up new skills and retraining and developing skills. And removal of demarcation. Demarcation was an issue in business for a long time. People would say, this is my area, I only work in this section, I don't work in that section. I'm not involved with that section, I'm not going to help out there. And it could be the other section needs extra support. One section is very quiet, very little activity, the other section is overworked, but the people in the quiet section would not help. It was demarcated. In other words, they were defending their territory. Well, ending that, introducing more flexibility, so that different parts of the workforce will help other parts of the workforce. When there's a peak demand in one area, workers from other areas can come and help. So it's a new realism, greater cooperation between HRM and employee relations, more integration between HRM and employee relations, better communications channels, more contact, more flexibility, more multitasking, more involvement. Traditional collectivism, well, focus on employee relations without HRM. So this is where management deal with employee relations, and there's no real role for HRM. HRM perhaps was involved at the recruitment stage, or setting some limits or functions in place regarding health and safety, and regarding training, and regarding perhaps remuneration and so on. But in terms of day-to-day running the business, it was management linked directly to the workforce. So it's a more pluralist industrial relations philosophy. The workforce and management combined to try and solve the problems and work out the issues. There was no big philosophy behind it, or big change behind it that would need thinking from the start, would involve perhaps the HRM people. So when big changes were required, perhaps new technologies or new products were being introduced, that could be a big issue, and one which would test traditional collectivism. But on a day-to-day basis, it ran. It ran with management dealing with the workforce directly and trying to resolve any issues. And generally speaking, on a day-to-day basis, the issues should be quite small. Nothing big or grand, or like I said in a moment ago, with new technology or new production facilities or new products. Management may prefer to work with a union instead of managing an HR department. So it might be better, it might be more efficient, and might be easier to work with a union. Perhaps have a union and have the workforce in a union. The union looked after the workforce, and then the management had one or two people to deal with. And providing there was good understanding between them, providing they had the same vision for the business, they were interested in the stability of the business, the survival of the business, and so on, then there was common ground, and they could negotiate and they could deal with issues. So there was no real need for an elaborate HR involvement. It was just a question of getting the union representatives into the office every so often, talking about any issues, trying to come up with solutions, resolving the issues, and moving on. A very straightforward practice. Unions are well established and provide efficient communications channels for employees and employers. Management of discipline, grievance, health and safety issues. The unions can deal with a lot of issues on the shop floor. Unions can deal with a lot of issues that concern the employees. They're good at listening to the employees, listening to the concerns, the worries, the problems, and taking back a whole variety of issues to management. So they're a very valuable source of information, and the management can therefore manage the business more effectively. They don't have to go through an elaborate HR procedure. It's dealt with very quickly. Individualized HRM. Well, the important emphasis on HRM without employee relations. Here, HRM is seen as quite important, and there's very little employee relations. A very uncommon approach to employee relations. Here, the policies would be made by the HRM department and issued to the workforce. And it's very similar to take it or leave it. If you don't like the policies, I guess you could leave the company. It's not a very common approach to business or to employee relations. Industrial action and disputes are very common in this approach. Clearly, the workers don't have a voice. They don't have any say in what's happening. The policies are being handed down by the HRM department, and the workforce must accept. If they don't accept, they leave. They could go on strike. There can be issues and disputes and so on. But this type of management is not very good at dealing with people. Instead, it issues policies that the people should follow. There's increased dissatisfaction, and there is no relevance to employee welfare. They don't make a connection between employee welfare and the whole processes. It's as if the workforce are being cut adrift. They don't have a conduit, a mechanism to deal with the management. The HR department issues the policies, and that's it. It stays there, and the workers either accept it or reject it. If they reject it, they leave, and the HR department will recruit new workers. So it's a very stark type of approach to HR and employee relations. The HR department are very powerful in this organization. They issue the policies and the employees must accept it if they're going to continue to work there. The black hole. Well, no employee relations and HRM policies or practices. No form of HRM policies and practices. Management do not feel the need for HRM practices and policies. So there's no HRM policies, no direction in that sense, no training programs, no one overseeing the workforce. Employee relations and unions are not seen as important in the approach. The employees are employed to do certain tasks, and providing they do the tasks, that's it. That's the job completed. If they don't do the tasks, they're let go. So the unions are ignored as well. They don't need the unions. They don't see the importance of unions. So there's no system in place to support or safeguard the employees. The employees are simply facilitators of production. They are hired to do a job, and as long as they do the job, there's not a problem. When they want more, or they're worried about certain issues at work, or they want to change something, they could be invited to leave. That's management's job. Management decide everything. So it's a black hole. It's difficult to know where that's going to go. So in this session we've looked at different approaches to employee relations and the development of employee relations strategies. Really what you should consider here is the four categories that we've just discussed, and also the importance of having good employee relations and good HR policies, which will lead to long-run sustainability of the business. Look at what issues can arise when there's a breakdown in employee relations and poor or not properly thought out HR policies. It's important that organizations see the employees as a valuable resource, but they're also human, and they spend their lives working within the organization. Their opinions and their attitudes should be taken into account. If for no other reason, then there simply are human beings who are working in this environment and should be treated properly. On a more economic basis, these employees also have expert knowledge of what happens in practice within the business, and therefore they should be consulted. They will have ideas about how to make improvements to the production system and to the flow of work through the organization. And finally, they are also consumers. It may be that they're able to make suggestions about the product or about the marketing strategy, and these should not be dismissed lightly. So having good relationships, good employee relationships, is important for the organization. Those are some of the sources that were used throughout, and that's all we're going to deal with in this session. So let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.